Meeting to order. This is the April 16th Budget Ways and Means meeting. I'm filling in for Julie Matuzak, who is excused because she's had surgery, as everybody knows. So with that, we do have a quorum here, and let's start with the agenda item called to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag of the United States and to the republic, one nation, under God, indivisible, for all. All right, roll call is Paul Gillaham is in attendance. And do you want to do roll call, or we can just do an assignment? Mary Bednar, oh, okay, and also Dan O'Leary, and Mike Aiello, and Kim Meltzer, Clinton Township Clerk. Mike Aiello, Treasurer, Kim Meltzer, Clinton Township Clerk. Also in attendance is our Township Attorney, and taking minutes is Debbie Kolakowski. With that, we need a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll make that motion and approve.
Motion by Mike Aiello, seconded by Paul Gillaham. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Aye. None? No nays? Okay, motion passes. Okay, the first agenda item is addressing of non-represented salary disparity compared to other communities. Huh? We just did that. That's okay. No problem. Address the item 1, which is the only item on the agenda, which is addressing non-represented salary disparity compared to other communities. And I brought this forward based on the issue of more and more we're seeing the department heads needing to address the issues of employment, not being able to keep employees, and then them having to come forward, asking the board for an adjustment. We've had it done with HR, civil service, I should say, and HR, actually, to fill a position, and we've had it done with the clerks industry, with our clerk's office, I'm sorry, and other departments as well. And I'm seeing that sometimes we address it at the board level, sometimes it's gone into a private conversation, and then some have to go through different steps that others have to. And what I'm asking for is, first of all, the ability to have a streamlined process that everybody would follow. And then secondly, also, I know that we, on the non-represented salaries, that's it's put together so that it is it responds to whatever the negotiations are. But those negotiations, I think that right now, given the fact that there's so many of our employees that are asking, to address this issue, it needs to be looked at more sooner than at the end of the contract. And so I'm asking this committee if we could make a recommendation to the board to look at the comparables, and there are some comparables of the non-represented in this packet that show the payroll from one community to other communities and the disparity that exists there. And I guess I'd like to open it up to have anybody else either show that they see this disparity, or that they disagree with it. And ultimately, my goal is to get this to go to the board to look at addressing the disparity of the non-represented payroll prior to the end of the contract. Not yet. Let's talk about it right now.
So, Ms. Meltzer, I thank you for putting the meeting together. However, I think it's important, one, that we hear from our HR director, because I don't believe this meeting should be taking place. This is a issue that affects both collective bargaining contracts. It has an impact Negotiations are something that happen through a process. The normal process is to adjust the pay of the non-represented employees at the time of bargaining contracts. And the issues that we brought up on a case-by-case basis, there have been very specific reasons for that. And in fact, you've supported most of them, with the exception of the one the other night. The non-represented group is bigger than what you've presented it as. There are tons and tons of employees that are part-time employees, like including all of your election workers, which you unilaterally raised the pay on without bringing it to the board. So this is in response to a person who left in your office, and you wanted to take certain causes of action, and those didn't happen the way you thought they should. And as a result of that, you're now making it a township-wide, systematic, disjointed process. And I think that's inappropriate, and I think it is irresponsible. It places the township in a very difficult position for negotiations, and I move that we make no recommendation to the board on this issue, because doing so will be harmful for the overall financial health of the township. These conversations should be part and parcel of the budget process. The budget process, we started our fiscal year April 1st. We're not even a month out from starting a new budget, and you're bringing these up after the fact when you had the opportunity to address these issues as part of the budget process. Several workshops were held. Crickets. Didn't hear a thing from you or other board members on these issues, and now we have an adopted budget, and now we're talking about these things. I don't think this is the appropriate course of action.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your input. I mean, that's the whole reason we're here, to talk about this. Budgets are created and they're adjusted throughout the year. That's not uncommon. What I am trying to get at is that given our economy over the last 5 years and what other communities are doing, this is an important part. There's nothing more important than our employees. And if we don't address the fact that we are going to be losing people, we are losing people, and it's not just in my office, it's, other offices as well. If we don't address this before the end of, my understanding is the contract in this, and the HR director may want to stand up and speak to this to confirm it. But my understanding is a non-represented contract won't be addressed until 28. Is that correct?
Well, from a procedural standpoint, first and foremost, it's not a contract. It's a policy,
Okay.
right? And the township board modifies that policy quite frequently, actually, during the year, depending on circumstance.
So does it come up
It
on
is
the 28th?
usually, well, when, for example, the assistant HR director position was added, and the board voted to do so, that was a amendment to the policy. Okay. It was adding that position into the policy. And that happens 2, 3, 4 times a year sometimes. It just depends on the circumstance. Generally, the non-represented policy is tied to the supervisory bargaining group. And the reason that's the case is that a vast majority of the positions in that group, if you can call it a group, it's only a group to the extent that they're not affiliated with anybody else. So, I mean, they don't really have any affinity for each other than the fact they're not affiliated with any other group, any other bargaining group, okay? That group is tied to the supervisory group and generally floats with them because it mostly reflects that group, not exclusively. The police chief and fire chief have special provisions within that policy that ties them to the the bargaining group that is immediately preceding them in the organizational chain of those departments. So the police chief, his benefits and compensation really fluctuate with the captain's contract in the police department, and the same thing for the chief, fire chief. It's the deputy chiefs, those two positions. Okay, most of the time when that policy is modified, it's because we followed a process in personnel vacancy to address these issues. Okay, I'm unaware of a single case in the last 5 years that a change to that policy, or any policy actually, as it relates to personnel and the staffing of personnel, has not gone through personnel vacancy in that process based on those rules.
Did
And in fact, and you've used that process on many occasions. This election coordinator position has been modified and remodified over the last 12 years numerous times. It's been moved into a bargaining unit. It was moved out of a bargaining unit. It has been rewritten. It has been retitled. It has been recompensated rather consistently over that time period. And all of those times followed the personnel vacancy process for doing so. And when we had the meeting about the election coordinator compensation and those other communities, I provided two pathways for modifying that particular process. For that particular position, you could either come to personnel vacancy and ask for the position to be filled as is, or you could reconstruct the position working with civil service, because it is a civil service classified position, and that position then could be brought to personnel vacancy with what you believed was the appropriate job description and the appropriate compensation. And those are the two paths. And those are in the personnel vacancy rules. Okay.
Did Barry Miller take this to personnel vacancy or no?
Excuse me?
Did Barry Miller take it to personnel vacancy, or just it was a wage adjustment?
Yeah, that was a wage adjustment, but no, he did not take it to personnel vacancy.
Okay, I'm just curious. I was just.
But quite frankly, neither did your election workers in 2024 when you added positions and sent a memo to the accounting department to pay them differently. Okay.
Yeah. So as we discussed yesterday, Clerk Meltzer, the position that was brought forward by the building department director was for a fill-in part-time inspector. So we are looking to hire an inspector. That pay is set. The position that we discussed at the board meeting the other night was to adjust the pay for a temporary person that we can bring in order to fill and conduct our statutory responsibility while we do not have that position filled. Comparing the pay and benefits of non-represented full-time employees and a fill-in inspector are so grossly out of line in terms of comparables.
Well, it's under the same category, so that's like,
Yes.
that's.
But within the non-represented pay and benefits, there are lots of categories of employees. These two share no comparison in terms of being on an equal footing for discussion. That was for a person that was going to be here temporarily so we can actually get inspections done, and we're not holding up businesses that need inspection, people's home projects that need approval, economic development within our community, and protect us against possible lawsuits if we don't meet our statutory responsibility to provide inspectors and conduct them in a timely basis according to the statute. That is in no way comparable to full-time non-represented employees. Your attempt to connect those issues and call for a 10% across the board pay increase it's befuddling. to me.
Well, it's not to me because the concern I have is that we're going to lose other employees because the other communities are addressing this issue. They're not waiting until the end of their contracts. They're bringing it to their boards, and the boards are making those determinations. And as a result, people are looking to go elsewhere. And we have some great employees here that know our community, that serve it very, very well. And to have them leave because we're not offering a competitive wage is irresponsible on our part. And I think it does need to be addressed. We have heard, I'll say I have heard from not just people in my office that, they're looking at other opportunities. And that's scary. I mean, we have already reduced the number of employees to operate services in our community by almost half from what it was prior to me coming here. So now we're asking more of our employees because they have to do more with, they have more to do with less people to do it. And we're not keeping up with that wage also that other communities are. So they're looking at this and they're saying, why would I stay here? There's nothing. And I mean, I know why some people are staying here because they do have a benefits program. And when they weigh out the negative with the positive, it's a better fit to stay here until they're ready to retire. But the non-represented employees don't have that kind of a contract, and they are going elsewhere. And I am concerned about that as a leader in this community, that others are looking elsewhere. And once you get a reputation like that, it's very hard to turn it around. And it's very costly to turn around. And right now, we're already reacting because we don't have the kind of revenue that these other communities have. So I think it puts us in a worse scenario if we don't address this more sooner than later. If we wait until the contract is done in 2028, I think we're going to lose more employees. And as a result, I don't know how we're going to execute our statutory. There's other departments that have statutory requirements as well. What are they going to do to address the issue that now they've got to try to find new employees that really don't know the work that needs to be done, can't service the public. This is about servicing the public. You're saying it's a personal matter. It's not a personal matter for me. It's how are we going to execute the statutory responsibilities with good employees? How do we do that when they're looking elsewhere? So this is a conversation I wanted to have, not to challenge HR, not to challenge finance, but to say, listen, let's look at this. Maybe this is something we should look at more sooner than later and not wait for this contract to end and meet the demands of what competition is out there.
Madam Chair, if I could give a little perspective. First of all, I'd be a beneficiary of this, so
Yes.
I'm always grateful when people look out for me financially because I'm grossly overpaid by 50%. I thought your 10% was too low. I want 50%. But from my standpoint, I do think this is the wrong forum because it has a ripple effect. Since the board meeting the other night, I've already had multiple department heads walk into my office and say, when's my turn? And they're under a union contract, and they're looking at it saying, why are we singling out the non-representative for these raises, if we think we are underpaying, right? So my concern is from a union negotiation standpoint, when we discuss these things in a public forum like the board meeting or the Budget Ways and Means, we're putting ourselves at a disadvantage in our negotiations. And I think the PERV committee is more appropriate because that's where strategy about personnel and collective bargaining and that sort of thing is discussed. And you can have honest discussions without alarming people, because I'm not convinced across the board we have a 10% problem. We might have pockets here and pockets there, and we should deal with that. And we can deal with that because it's a policy as opposed to a contract. There's no deadline we have to wait for, right? Mm-hmm. The union impact and the ability to not have our negotiations influenced tells me we're probably stepping on ourselves even right now. But even if you get past that, there's only one person in this room that actually has the qualifications to do these comparisons, and he might even say, given the breadth of it and all that he would want other people to look at it. But there's way more in this than just comparing salaries. The benefits do matter. The fact that we work a different schedule than most towns do, an hour less, matters, right? And you got to take those things into consideration. There's a whole analysis that would need to be done. And simply taking 4 or 5 growth entities like Macomb and Shelby. Yeah, I mean, I wish I had the money here that I had in Washington. You know, we were doing great because we were growing like crazy. We're a mature community, right? And there's all those factors that have to be taken into consideration. And frankly, our ability to pay, which, as you know, we've been having our share of problems. So to me, there's a whole lot that goes into this analysis that I don't think, in a swath of give everybody 10%, I don't think that holds. And I think we're, stepping on ourselves by having this conversation. I really do. And in terms of, whenever I try to solve a problem, I always ask myself, what's the size of the problem? Because is it really as big of a problem? In terms of, I've been here 5 years next month, and in the non-represented contract, the only people that have left are the position that's leaving now, and people who have retired from other positions like police chief, fire chief. I don't think we've had this, even at the department head level, we haven't had this brain drain. Doesn't mean you don't want to compensate, per market to your ability to do so. But we haven't had this brain drain. We're reacting to a problem that I think is specific to either a person and their opportunity, the fact that they got a promotion, which is great for them. I think we're reacting to that. And, we need to just keep in mind the sustainability issues and the union contract issues and all that when we're discussing this stuff.
Well, I want to make it clear too, and I appreciate that, Dan, but that was voted down at the board meeting, so the 10%. What I'm talking about here now is the non-represented disparities. When I look at other communities and we may disagree on that a little bit, but I do think there is a disparity, and I do think, given the fact we did it, how we managed it when we, as we are a community that's fully grown, and other, juxtaposed to other communities that are growing, yes, those revenues are better. So we cut back on employees, right? So we don't have the number of employees. I mean, that was a huge sacrifice here that we took on, and we haven't, added new employees. My office, we haven't had it. I mean, I have 3 people, well, now just 2, with the ability to execute elections, where other communities have 6 to 9 people to execute elections. So we are doing a lot more with a lot less. And I think as a result of that, it's even more important for us. I mean, so we're saving a lot of money in that regard. So now it's even more important then to say, okay, well, we have to keep up with these wages and how they compare to other communities, because not only do we have less people, we're not keeping up with pay by comparison. So that's what this discussion is. That's what I felt like there's a disparity also, not just in when we compare the communities, but how these are addressed. Bill just addressed that. He's saying, it's a policy, it isn't a contract. I appreciate that. I also noticed that everybody likes to say that I've made these changes a lot in my office. They bring that up as an argument to not maybe talk about this, but that's a whole nother issue that I've had to address with the changing of the industry and the lack of being able to have a lot of people in my office to compensate when somebody isn't there. I heavily respect, greatly respect. Keeping, our costs down in this township, especially in my office, have done a great job of doing that over the years that I've been here. And so it isn't about me trying to, have more money or whatever. I'm just looking at how are we going to maintain our employees here that are well trained, that serve this community incredibly well, know their industry well, when they could easily get do the same job someplace else for a lot more. So that's my concern.
If I may address the retention issue.
Okay.
I went back and looked at the non-represented group specifically. We've only had one person leave in the last 5 years that didn't leave because of retirement, and that was the position that we're discussing today. Okay. And it was brought up the other night, although it was implied or not specifically stated, that somehow we were losing the building inspector, the plumbing inspector, because he was going somewhere else. In fact, that's not the case. He's basically retiring and moving to where his family lives because that was his choice. I would say probably, I'm ballparking it here, but the township, 95% of the positions that vacate are due to retirement. They're not due to people leaving. And when people do leave, I usually know why they're leaving, and it's almost always to take a position that is a different classified position in another municipality. So it's really comparing apples and oranges and saying, I'll just use it as an example. If I was leaving here as the election coordinator and I was going to be the deputy clerk at another community, it's not the same job, right? And that's not the pay, right? My experience here with the township is that we actually have a net inflow of people from other communities. And just look at our department heads. Over half of our department heads came from someplace else, from another community. Right. So I wouldn't know how to track those numbers. I could probably go back and figure it out over a period of time. But my sense of it is that we actually receive more employees from other municipalities than we send to other municipalities. And typically when that happens, it's because they're taking a different position than what they had here.
Didn't we
and
lose our
there's
assessor?
no reason to do it. You know, the literature on employee retention, people always assume it's money. And yeah, if you look at the research, the number one reason why somebody leaves is because they don't like their boss. But usually the second reason is it's a small organization, and the only way to move up is to move out because we're very flat
Right.
here. We don't have a huge hierarchical structure. So the only way to move up in a position is to go to another community to take a position that's of a higher grade than what we do now. But we definitely don't have a retention issue here.
Well, I do know that we just lost our assessor, the director of assessing, that went to another community that was getting paid a lot more. And his intention, at least verbally at the time, was that he would probably retire here, but then this offer came up. So I think
That's actually not correct. So in my discussions with the assessor, he was looking to figure out how he can transition to retirement. And so he was offered a position that allowed him to work, in a sense, part-time for
more than
almost a full-time salary.
Yeah.
And
That's a
and
competitiveness.
so that was a personal choice.
Yes, of course, all these are.
Here's the thing that I think we need to sort of put this in context, and it's been referred to, but I've been mentioning that we are transitioning from being an outer ring suburb to an inner ring suburb. And when that happens, your cost structure goes up and your revenue grows not as fast as your expenditures. Your revenue stagnates or it just ticks up, but your expenses exceed that growth rate. That is the reality. That is the reality, quite frankly, for the state of Michigan, that now has fewer employees than they did back in the 60s because there's not been a huge growth rate within the state of Michigan. Now, what you just heard is that the whole premise and assumptions that underpin you bringing this issue forward are actually factually incorrect. So the reality is when you're in a position, how does this differ from the private sector? People in the workplace now are going to be more mobile. When the old model of going to work for a company or even an organization and staying there 30 years and retiring with a pension and retiree health care is a thing of the past. During the Clinton administration, it was identified that people are going to change jobs 7 times throughout the course of a career. That is part of the reason why pensions are being made mobile rather than defined benefit pension plans these days. That is a reality, not just for us, but for everyone. And if the public sector can't figure that out, then all the assertions that we are not as efficient as the private sector are actually true. The fact is, we can figure it out. The fact is, we have figured it out. The fact is, there are school districts that are thriving, that have increasing enrollment, And there are school districts with declining enrollment that they can't find a finance director who knows public accounting to the point where they know the forms they need to file with the treasurer's office in order to actually have us collect taxes for them. And so then when we get to the issue of taxpayers here, we need to consider the impact on our taxpayers. And 10% across the board when we don't even know what that would cost, and adjusting and having this meeting that impact negotiations in a negative way on assumptions that are incorrect is a disservice to the organization and irresponsible to your role of leadership within the community. You held hostage a part-time temporary employee because you were angry about losing one of your employees.
You make all these
We can't control that.
accusations that from your perspective,
It's
that
the-
is
it's
not.
the vote.
And
It's the vote that took
and
place,
it
Ms.
was not
Meltzer.
one vote. It was 2 votes in addition to mine. So it is not one person doing this. You're making an inaccurate statements as
Clerk
well.
Meltzer,
And you
when the
are
issue of the
also-
plumbing inspector came up, you attached a 10% across the board pay increase for all of the non-represented employees.
because that was a
And when
non-represented
yes,
position.
Yes, but there are dramatic differences, as I pointed out earlier. So where we're at now is, the fact is, when that was separated, those 2 issues, the 10%, you voted against the plumbing inspector because you didn't like the fact that you couldn't attach those 2 things together when they had nothing to do with one another.
That's not true. The issue it wasn't going to be resolved by what was being brought forward. They needed, in my opinion, and we wanted to talk about it further, but you shut down the conversation and moved on to another agenda item. So what we wanted to talk about was how, even though that percentage that the department head was asking for was still not going to guarantee that he would be able to have those that inspector stay, because we were still going to be so much further under than what the competition was, that he listed. And so what I wanted to propose was that we instead make the pay the same as the full-time, not the amount that was about $8 less, or $6, I'm sorry, $6 in some sense, less than the competition was going to be pay per hour. I didn't see that as a solution when you looked at those comparables. And my goal was, which you shut everybody down from talking about it, was that we would make a motion to support the pay at the full-time rate, not with benefits, obviously, and insurance, but with that full-time pay. And that would bring it up to a more competitive wage, which is what I'm talking about here. And you're throwing all these other accusations in. You're still talking about the 10%. You're still talking about the board meeting, not this meeting. And all I'm saying at this meeting is I think we have to look at the disparity that exists. And the private sector, what they do, Paul, when they can't afford to pay their employees, they shut their doors, right? So they can't compete, right? They can't. There's nothing more important to any business than the employees that make it run. And if you can't afford to pay them, they're going to leave. And you're going to have no one, and then the private sector shuts down.
Okay,
So
those are wonderful gestures. What I want to know,
well, you're
because
bringing
you're
up
talking
gestures as well.
but you're talking in circles here.
No, I'm not.
So you just heard from the personnel director that the assumptions that premise this discussion in the first place are incorrect. I don't know if you heard that, but that's what I just heard. And so I want to know where you want to take this now.
I said
Because I think the efforts and the motivations are incredibly transparent. And I don't think they're just about, appreciating our employees, because we appreciate our employees. Mm-hmm. We work to make sure we negotiate contracts that are fair, mm-hmm. that compensate people fairly, and that they can earn a good wage, and a salary that can support their needs. And so I don't think we differ in that regard. I think we differ on the standpoint of there needs to be a process, and it should involve the people that do this, that we hire, that we pay to guide us in these efforts.
Agree.
Not come to a board meeting or a budget ways and means meeting and not listen to the people that actually told us that the underpinnings are incorrect.
Well, I do believe that and I don't care how that format, if we continue to use it in the same format as taking it to personnel vacancy, but I think we need to look at it on a global setting. That's your terminology. You said that you wanted to address this at a global, from a global position. So that actually confirms my comment about the disparities in the community. So I don't know why you're backpedaling on this right now, but that is what was said by you, and you agreed that this was an issue that we have to deal with. So if we are going to deal with it, we should talk about it here in an open forum. We can do that, but we can still make it so that the appropriate department heads are the ones that are going to move it along. I'm not suggesting that we as a board unilaterally make that decision, even though we can, and other communities do that. But I can see that there isn't the support to do that. So we should be directing either through personnel vacancy or a meeting. Well, personnel vacancy would be the best because that is not a open public meeting, if that's what your concern is. And we can address it on a township-wide disparity of 4 non-represented employees. And that's my motion. Your motion failed. You did not get a second. I don't think we had a second for your amendment or your motion to recommend, not to have a recommendation at this point. So my recommendation is that this committee direct HR and civil service to look at the comparables for non-represented.
Okay, the Budget Ways and Means meeting is a subset of the board. The board can direct. The supervisor can direct the departments. The Budget Ways and Means Committee does not direct the departments. We make recommendations to the board. It's a recommending body to
All
the
right,
board.
then that would be directed to the board to direct HR and civil service to take a look at non-represented.
My thing is, we have a fundamental disagreement whether this conversation should be taking place in the Budget Ways and Means meeting because of the detrimental impact it has to the bargaining process. And so as a result of that, I move to adjourn this meeting. And if that is not supported, then my participation will end in this meeting and there will not be a quorum and therefore no recommendations will come forward.
That's your choice. That's your choice. So,
Can I ask a question?
yeah, yes.
So my understanding, Bill, is that the appropriate place of this type of discussion should be the vacancy.
Personnel vacancy review, correct.
And your suggestion is moving it to that committee. Is that correct,
Well,
Kim?
Paul correctly corrected my motion, which was that we direct it to personnel vacancy and civil service to address, but really this body is not designed to do that. This body, the way this body works is we make recommendations to the board, and then the board would have to decide on it and then make its decision whether to direct personnel vacancy and civil service to address the non-represented outside of the contract.
Yeah, just one finer point too. Of all the positions in the non-represented group, there are only 3 that qualify for civil service, general employee, so it really doesn't affect civil service at all. And they would not undertake that kind of work.
So if we're trying to keep this discussion not in the public eye until we figure it all out, then moving it to the board to make the decision whether we push it forward doesn't seem appropriate. I'm just asking. I'm a little
I
confused.
suppose the board could instruct, for that path of action to be taken.
Okay.
But I think you're right in the sense that the more we talk about this issue in public forums, the more detrimental impact it has on the collective bargaining process.
So at this point,
So right now, Paul made a motion to make no recommendation to the board.
correct.
And right now, it has no second. So it has failed.
Okay.
So if it has a second, then we can vote on it. The first one was his recommendation, though. So
Does a motion to adjourn require a second?
So do we have a second on Paul's motion to not make a recommendation to the board? Is there a second? Okay, motion fails. No second. All right. Did you make a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Is there a second to adjourn?
I just want to make sure I got a clear understanding here. That I understand that this meeting need to be further discussed, should be appropriately moved over to the Personnel Vacancy Committee. My question is, how do we get it to there? If we don't want to take it,
If I
can
could
make-
make a suggestion?
We make a recommendation to the board.
the three of-
And the board can then.
The three
make
of
that
you are
recommendation.
the operating officers. I mean, the trustees are policy people, legislators, but you guys are the day-to-day operating officers, and you guys meet frequently and have that right to meet frequently. And if you guys want to have a sit-down and discuss an operating issue, you always have that right. And the three of you can always have those conversations, and that there's nothing that doesn't violate the Open Meetings Act. It's totally appropriate. You're the operating heads. So it's not like we can't talk. We just shouldn't be talking publicly.
If I could throw something out there, my department runs comparables for negotiations and on positions all the time, and it's something that we do, without direction, because it's part of what we do. So as long as I know that it's the desire of Mr. Gilliam for me to do that, then I will undertake that task. I don't believe I have to have board direction to tell me to do that.
thank you for the clarification.
All right, well, again, we did not have our last meeting. Mike and I did attend, but you were not available. You were gone. So we could, our last executive committee meeting, we were supposed to have. And we weren't given notice that you weren't going to be available, but if we can have that conversation.
I'm certainly open to that.
Okay. You open to that?
Yeah, not tomorrow. Tomorrow, my calendar's pretty jammed.
No, I didn't set a date,
Yeah.
but we need to do
Yeah,
it.
I'm open to that, of course.
I'm not available, I don't believe, at that time. So we will have to have it,
I
we
can,
can have it this
I can
week.
ask Debbie to schedule you guys together if you like.
Okay.
Sounds good.
No, I don't think so. I mean, HR maybe, but. Okay. I'm fine with that, if we want to continue the conversation on that. Well, as long as, it's possible I can attend if I do it remotely. I could possibly do that, but I'll have to look to see if you want to do Wednesday. All right, well, with that said, if that's the direction you guys are willing to go in and continue to have this conversation, I'm fine with that. And so then we can entertain a motion to adjourn because there's nothing else on. Well, is there any public comment? No public comment, so we would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned.